Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. 12 hours into a rescue shift, Oliver Stroud finds a torn envelope in his mailbox and a $20,000 bill for demolishing his brother's mountain cabin. But the cabin was on his land, gone without a trace, no warning, no debris, just one burning question: who erased his home and why? I had just gotten off a 12-hour rescue shift when I found the envelope. It was jammed halfway into my mailbox, the top edge torn like someone tried to yank it back out. The return address read Whispering Pines HOA, which immediately made my stomach turn. I hadn't been to the cabin in nearly 9 months, but even a name like that felt like a bad omen. Inside was a single page. No pleasantries, no greetings, just legal language so stiff it felt like it had been written with a chisel. According to them, I owed $20,000 for demolition costs associated with an unapproved structure located within community grounds. They even had the audacity to include a payment deadline: 30 days. It took me a solid minute to realize what they were referring to. My brother's cabin. My cabin now. The one he'd spent 7 years building with his own 2 hands, using salvaged pine and stone quarried from the hill behind it. The one nestled on an acre and a half of high mountain solitude, far from HOA nonsense. The one I inherited after the accident. My jaw locked. I read the letter again. Slower this time. Same result. They'd knocked the damn thing down. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the letter. I just sat on my porch in a stunned, quiet haze until my rescue boots felt like anvils and the sun slid behind the trees. Then I called my lawyer. Tom Harkness was a friend before he was my attorney, which meant I got to skip the fake politeness. I read the letter to him word for word. There was silence on the line. Then, what the hell are they talking about? You tell me. That land's yours. I saw the deed myself when you probated your brother's estate. Still have it. You never got a notice. Zoning complaints? Inspection threats? Nothing. Not so much as a parking ticket. Okay, first step. Don't contact them directly. I'll start digging into the filing trail. But listen, Oliver, this smells like litigation bait. You're gonna want to stay frosty. No outbursts. I mumbled agreement, even as I stood up, grabbed my go bag, and started packing. Frosty wasn't going to cut it. The cabin was tucked in the folds of the Blue Ridge, about 3.5 hours north if you took the highway, more if you chose the winding back roads, which I always did. Something about the journey calmed me, usually. This time, it just stretched the anxiety like wire under tension. I kept running the timeline in my head. I'd last checked the security app 4 months ago. The signal was live. Nothing unusual. The system had armed itself, as it always did. When I finally hit the gravel trail leading toward the property, my headlights caught what I expected to be the familiar curve of the gatepost, except it wasn't there. Just a weird, too even patch of grass glowing a sickly green under the beams. I slowed the truck, heart hammering, and rolled forward. My tires crossed the line where the fence used to be, where the gravel used to crunch beneath the tires, where my brother's handmade welcome sign used to hang. Now, nothing. Just a smooth, sterile clearing, like someone had scraped the earth clean with a scalpel. I parked and stepped out. My boots hit ground that felt unfamiliar, leveled, resodded. Too perfect. I walked the perimeter in a daze. No debris. No concrete chunks, no foundation scars. The chimney that took 3 weeks to build by hand. Gone. The solar rack on the south wall. Gone. Even the goddamn tool shed that held a generator and 2 axes was erased like it never existed. It wasn't just demolished. It was erased. I opened the security app on my phone. Disarmed. Status inactive. Deactivated 4 months ago. I hadn't deactivated it. I stood there, the wind curling around me like a whisper I couldn't quite hear. My hands clenched and unclenched. I could still see the wood knots on the door in my mind, still smell the pine sap that used to drip onto the porch. That place was my brother, his legacy, my retreat. And someone had wiped it off the map and sent me a bill. Back in the truck, I sat with the engine idling and tried to think like Tom. Don't do anything stupid. But I wasn't wired for passive. I'd seen enough death in my line of work to know that silence doesn't fix anything. I opened the glove box, grabbed the worn folder that held my property deed, inheritance transfer, survey maps, everything. Then I turned the truck around and started driving straight toward Whispering Pines. Not back to town, not to sleep on it, to the source. They were going to give me answers, one way or another. I reached the edge of Whispering Pines around 9 the next morning. The roads wound into the hills like they were ashamed of what lay ahead, and maybe they had reason to be. I'd only been to this HOA fortress once before, years ago when my brother had first shown me the problem neighbors trying to creep up the mountain with their smug little covenants and matching mailboxes. I remembered him pointing toward their clubhouse and saying, "That's where empires of bullshit are born." I thought he was being dramatic. I owed him an apology. The place looked like a parody of Wealth. Faux brick entrances, security cameras pretending to deter crime, flower beds that probably had bylaws governing their symmetry. The HOA office sat just past a roundabout, in a sleek, glass-paneled building that clashed with the mountain around it like a tooth implant in a bear's skull. I parked crooked across 2 spaces. Petty? Maybe. Satisfying? Absolutely. Inside, the air smelled like lavender and toner. A young woman at the front desk gave me the kind of smile people reserve for lost tourists about to ask where the Eiffel Tower is. I didn't waste time. "I need to speak with Karen Aldridge." Her smile dimmed a notch. "Do you have an appointment?" She demolished my house. Thought that might get me on the schedule. The receptionist blinked, then adjusted her blouse like it might give her more authority. "Miss, Aldridge is currently in a meeting." "So was I muttered, "with 4 walls and a roof until she erased them." She opened her mouth to respond, but I was already walking. The hallway was glass-walled and sterile, with door plaques like community development and covenants and restrictions. Near the end was Executive Operations, Karen Aldridge. Jackpot. The guard caught up to me just as I was turning the knob. "Sir, I need you to stop right there." I did not stop. I shoved the door open. Karen was on the phone, seated behind a desk too big for anyone without a UN title. She glanced up like I was a poorly timed UPS package. "I'll call you back," she said, then placed the phone down with practiced slowness. "Where's my house?" I asked. She folded her hands. "Mr. Stroud, you demolished my property, my cabin in the hills. The one that's been legally owned by my family for 15 years, Mr. Stroud," she said in a tone that could curdle milk. "The structure you're referring to was removed under Section 8 of the Whispering Pines Community Standards. It was classified as an unpermitted hazardous build on community-maintained land. The demolition was lawful, approved by vote, and documented. That land is mine." Her eyes didn't flicker. "Our most recent boundary verification placed that parcel within our jurisdiction. The property had no updated filings. The structure had been vacant for over 6 months. And you didn't notify me. We attempted contact through certified mail. No response was received. I stepped forward, hands shaking with effort not to slam them on the desk. You knew who owned it. My name's on the deed. You had no legal right to touch that house. Karen didn't move. Sir, if you have a dispute, you may take it up with our legal team. I suggest doing so calmly and through the appropriate channels. Calm. That word again. Like they'd scripted it. You disabled my security system. You entered private property. You erased a man's legacy and called it landscaping. I'm not here for channels." The guard grabbed my shoulder. Instinct took over. I twisted out, shoved back, and the guy hit the wall with a dull thud. Karen shrieked and reached for a panic button, but I slammed the door shut and wedged my boot under it. My pulse was nuclear. "Answer me," I shouted. "Who gave you access? Who altered the records?" Karen stood now, finger trembling toward a stack of binders. "You're assaulting an HOA officer." I pounded the desk hard enough to knock over her penholder. "You erased my home." Behind me, the door cracked open as 2 more guards forced their way in. They dragged me back, pinned me to the carpet. Cold plastic clicked around my wrists. I saw Karen's face for the last time that day. Not smug, not scared, just cold. Like she knew the system would catch me long before it ever touched her. The holding cell in Blue Ridge County wasn't much to look at. Concrete bench, stale air, flickering light overhead, like it was trying to blink out of existence. I'd been in worse places, mostly on rescue missions, but this one had a particular sting to it. It's one thing to be locked up after getting drunk in a bar. It's another to sit in a cage for demanding an explanation for the obliteration of your own damn house. They kept me there overnight for processing. No charges yet, just a vague mention of disturbing the peace and forcible entry. The paperwork was still being sorted out, they said. Translation: Karen was taking her sweet time deciding just how hard she wanted to hit me. Around 10 the next morning, the door buzzed, and in walked Tom Harkness looking like he'd already read the entire police report and hated every word of it. "You're an idiot," he said flatly, even before I'd stood up. "Good to see you too. They've filed a formal complaint. HOA claims you assaulted security and made threats to the board president. There's a preliminary court date in 10 days. If you so much as sneeze wrong, they'll paint you as violent and unstable." I sat back down. My wrists were sore from the cuffs. She looked me in the eye and said the land belonged to them. They doctored a boundary map and had my cabin flattened. I know. You told me last night. Between the shouting, I rubbed my eyes. They had the nerve to bill me for it. Tom sighed, pulling out a yellow notepad. Let's get back to facts. I've started the paperwork for a countersuit. You've got the deed. Title is clear. Taxes paid. I've even got photographs showing your family's ownership goes back before Whispering Pines was even incorporated. So we hit them with property destruction and trespassing and conspiracy to commit fraud if we can prove someone inside falsified land documents. But first, we need to understand how they pulled this off. They didn't just bulldoze your home on a whim. There's a chain of action here, and I want to follow every rotten link. I leaned forward. You think they had help? I think HOA boards like this don't act without cover. We need to find out who signed off on the demolition order, who filed the temporary boundary shift, and who shut off my security system. I finished. Tom gave me a sharp look. Wait, what? I explained it again. The app. 4 months ago, the signal dropped. I hadn't disabled it. It required two-step authentication. The only way that could have happened was if someone faked my authorization or had back-end access. Tom's brow furrowed. That changes everything. We're not just looking at civil violation now. We might be dealing with a coordinated criminal operation. Yeah, I said, my voice dry. And I was the test subject. By noon, I was released on bond, under the condition I stay away from the Whispering Pines office. A small price to pay. I wasn't planning on going near them again without a warrant or a wrecking ball. Back at my house in Dahlonega, I sat on my porch with a legal pad and wrote down everything I remembered. Dates I visited the cabin, photos I'd taken, emails I sent to my brother before the accident. I dug out the original USB stick that held our digital land survey, marked and verified with GPS. Tom called late that night. I found something. Good or bad? Both. The demolition request wasn't filed through standard city procedures. It came through a rural maintenance exemption, the kind used for storm-damaged structures. Fast-tracked. No inspections, no hearings, and the signature on the request. R. Gaskins. He's the city liaison for Whispering Pines. Or was. He resigned 2 months ago. Something about that name sparked. My brother mentioned him once. Said he was the kind of guy who thought a handshake was more legal than a notary. Tom exhaled slowly. It gets better. The security company that installed your cabin system, subsidiary of Calden Services, and Calden's regional director sits on the HOA board. With Karen, I laughed once dryly. Jesus Christ. Exactly. This isn't over a cabin. This is a racket. So what do we do? Tom's voice dropped to a growl. We dig. I'll file preservation orders first thing tomorrow. We're not just proving they knocked over your house. We're proving they've done it before. I stood and looked out across my yard. Trees swayed in the wind like they were whispering secrets. Maybe they were. Let's burn the whole thing down, I said. Tom chuckled. Legally, Oliver. Legally. The next morning started with coffee, a pen, and a corkboard I dragged out of the basement. I pinned a printed map of the Whispering Pines overlay on one side and my deed with survey lines on the other. The borders didn't match, not even close. According to every legal document I owned, my property sat squarely outside their jurisdiction. But according to what they filed with the city, my land had mysteriously changed zip codes for a few months, just long enough for them to roll in and wipe it clean. Tom arrived mid-morning, holding a stack of emails and public records with enough red ink and sticky notes to fill a courtroom. He looked tired, pissed, and laser-focused, my favorite version of him. We've got something, he said, slapping a paper down. It was a digital request form from the county's planning office. Subject line, emergency sanitation clearance, unsafe structure. Signed, R. Gaskins. Attached, a blurry satellite photo with a red outline. My cabin boxed in like a condemned bunker. That image is 6 years old, I said. The porch wasn't even finished yet. Doesn't matter. That was the only visual evidence attached to the demolition request. No in-person inspection, no structural evaluation, and the clearance was approved in under 48 hours. I stared at the paper, trying to breathe. He had no right. He didn't need it. Gaskins had clearance authority for disaster zones, thanks to a loophole left over from a mountain flood 5 years ago. And Whispering Pines exploited that, so they used flood recovery rules to demolish my house because it looked abandoned on an old satellite scan? More or less, except they didn't do this for your safety. They did it for land grab. Gaskins signed the clearance, HOA filed the claim, Calden Security disabled your alarm system, and then a subcontractor rolled up and erased your brother's legacy. I didn't say anything for a while. I just stood there and listened to the rage crawling under my skin. Tom tapped another document. You remember Haley Aldridge, Karen's daughter, ran for city council last year. Lost bad, she's listed as the person who made the deactivation request to Calden's system. My jaw tightened. That's illegal. She's not authorized on the account. Tom nodded. We're requesting Calden's call records now and subpoenaing their internal audit logs. If we're right, this wasn't just some rogue HOA vote. This was coordinated fraud. A silence settled between us, thick with possibility. Then I asked the question that had been pulsing in the back of my brain for days. You think they've done this to other people? Tom answered by opening a folder marked Previous Demolitions, WPHOA. Inside were 5 addresses, all in Whispering Pines, all isolated properties on the edges of the community. Every one of them with the same pattern: temporary reassignment in county records, satellite photo justification, security systems disabled under suspicious circumstances, and homes raised with no litigation until after the fact. One of them was a 74-year-old widow. Another was a Navy veteran whose land had been vacant during deployment. This is a goddamn scheme, I said. A fraud ring in khakis and golf shirts. Tom cracked a small smile. And we're going to break it open. That night, I met with a private investigator. His name was Ben Keller, ex-law enforcement, now freelancing in land dispute cases and municipal corruption. A man who knew how to find ghosts hiding in zoning logs. He carried a weathered leather folder and wore sunglasses indoors. I liked him immediately. I've done a quick dig, he said, spreading out photos and a rough timeline on my kitchen table. I've already confirmed that Gaskins received over $20,000 in contractor consulting fees from a company tied to the same demolition firm used on your cabin. I blinked. Bribery. Ben nodded. Or kickbacks. Same difference in court. And the demolition firm, they're registered to a P.O. box that links back to a shell company Karen's husband owns. Tom leaned forward. You're kidding. Nope. Classic shell laundering. They made the paperwork look like routine HOA cleanup, but the money trail says otherwise. And here's the kicker. Calden Security redacted the identity verification logs for the alarm deactivation, which means they're hiding something. I sat back in my chair, staring at the pin board, now cluttered with pins, string, and photos like some paranoid cop's murder wall. All of this, I said, to steal land from a guy who wanted peace and trees. Not just you, Ben said. They thought you'd never come back. You were out of sight. And if this had stayed quiet another few months, someone from the HOA would have discovered the cleared land, voted to annex it into community property, and resold it for profit. I looked at Tom. We've got them, don't we? He nodded. We're close. But if you want this to stick, we need media attention, pressure, witnesses. We go public, and we do it now. For the first time in days, I felt something like control slipping back into my hands. Then let's make some noise, I said. The article dropped on a Thursday morning. Mountain HOA accused of orchestrated land theft scheme. Right there on the front page of the Appalachian Courier, with a high-res photo of my flattened plot and a headline that practically howled for blood. Tom had worked his media contacts overnight, and Ben handed off just enough documentation to make the story credible but not actionable. Yet, we didn't want them lawyering up before we finished collecting the good stuff. By noon, the phones at Whispering Pines were melting. Homeowners were calling, reporters were circling, and somewhere between the HOA Facebook group and a morning radio segment, the name Karen Aldridge had become regional shorthand for fraud in a pantsuit. I watched the whole thing unfold from the porch with a glass of coffee and my laptop open. One neighbor from Whispering Pines, someone I didn't know, sent me a message. You're not the only one. They tried to take my mother's garden lot last year. Wouldn't believe the pressure they put on her. By the end of the day, we had 4 more potential witnesses. Tom started building the class action framework. Meanwhile, Ben got his hands on something new. I met him that evening in a Denny's parking lot because, apparently, that's where truth lives now. He pulled a flash drive out of his coat pocket and handed it to me like it was radioactive. "Security cam footage," he said. "Your system stores 30 days of backup on a local hard drive. HOA thought they erased everything when they wiped the alarm, but they only disabled the live signal. I plugged it in the second I got home. The footage was grainy, time-stamped 2:15 in the morning 4 months ago. A black SUV idled at the edge of my driveway. 4 people stepped out, all in reflective vests. One of them carried a clipboard. Another held a portable radio. I watched them walk the perimeter, shine lights through my windows, then open the front door with a key. Not forced entry, no crowbar, a key. I paused the video and just stared at the frame. When the demolition crew showed up 2 days later in the same camera feed, daylight this time, they didn't question anything. They had paperwork. They had authorization. They had Karen. In one frame, she stood off to the side in a beige coat and sunglasses, gesturing toward the house like a smug general giving orders. I snapped a still, printed it, and tacked it to the corkboard. I couldn't stop pacing after that. My mind kept circling one detail like a vulture: the key. That cabin had 2 copies of the master key, one with me, one in my brother's old safety box, sealed after the estate closed. Unless someone had stolen that key during probate, there was only one other explanation. They made a copy. Someone accessed my cabin before any of this started, probably during the first map adjustment when the land was falsely annexed. They'd been planning this for months. That night, Tom filed emergency motions for a temporary injunction against any further HOA demolitions and began the process of subpoenaing Karen's financial records. We were escalating fast and the pressure was starting to crack the shell. The next morning, a second article dropped. This time, it wasn't us. It came from an anonymous source and included scanned HOA internal memos referencing something called the reclamation list. It was worse than we thought. The list contained addresses, ownership statuses, comments like seasonal use only, low enforcement risk, legacy deed, check for updates. My property was on it, marked target number 6, approved. 5 others had red check marks beside them. This wasn't a one-off. This was a playbook. Tom lost it. They're creating a shadow inventory. Whispering Pines is running a land flip operation through fake maintenance removals. Ben called 5 minutes later. "You've got a mole," he said. "Someone inside the HOA board is feeding this stuff to the press. Smart too. Knows how to leak without getting caught." I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. Someone inside the beast was throwing up flares. And then the third call came. It was Karen. She left a voicemail. Her voice was icy but shaky, like a porcelain teacup someone had put in the microwave. "Mr. Stroud, I strongly recommend you cease public accusations. You're damaging community trust and exposing yourself to significant liability. If this continues, I'll be forced to pursue civil remedies." I replayed it 3 times. Then I forwarded it to Tom. He just said, "Perfect." That's retaliation. She just gave us another count. By the weekend, the HOA board was publicly splintering. One member resigned on Facebook Live. Another posted a tweet thread about Karen's intimidation tactics. The Courier ran a Sunday op-ed titled "The House That Greed Flattened." We weren't just building a case anymore. We were setting fire to their entire operation. And the best part, we hadn't even taken them to court yet. By Monday morning, Tom's inbox looked like it had been hit with a data bomb. Whistleblowers, homeowners, ex-contractors, all of them crawling out of the woodwork now that Karen's little HOA empire was hemorrhaging. One anonymous message included a scanned invoice, $4,500, billed by a local demolition company, paid through a shadow account connected to Whispering Pines. The service line item, structure removal, Outpost Lane, my address. We were getting closer. Tom and Ben spent the next 2 days locked in the legal war room, lining up affidavits and filing motions. Meanwhile, I drove out to the county records office in Gilmer to pull every scrap of paper tied to my plot: deed history, zoning overlays, historic easement designations, anything. If HOA tried this on others, they'd leave patterns. The woman at the desk, a silver-haired clerk with a badge that said Dolores and a suspicious eye, raised a brow as I laid out my request. "What's the occasion?" she asked. Someone bulldozed my house, I replied. Her eyebrow didn't drop. You a Stroud? Yeah. You're the second one. I froze. What do you mean? Few years back, your brother came in here waving survey maps and yelling about boundary tampering, claimed someone had moved the pins. Raised hell till we pulled the archived plats. She dug around in a drawer and handed me a yellowing copy of an old survey map. Stroud parcel, 1.52 acres, clearly outlined. No overlaps, no ambiguity. She flipped to a newer overlay. There it was, subtle but undeniable. The boundary had been digitally redrawn to include my land inside Whispering Pines. It had a timestamp. Who approved the change? I asked. Dolores shrugged. Says Gaskins are on the approval line. He ain't with us no more. Quit right before Christmas. Lot of paperwork went walking when he left. I scanned the footer. It had a QR code and document control number. Perfect. I snapped photos of everything, printed copies, and drove straight to Tom's office. He laid the new evidence on his table, piecing it together like a detective with a crime board. This confirms it. Your land was fraudulently reclassified under HOA jurisdiction for a temporary 4-month window, just long enough to justify the demolition. Gaskins filed the change, then resigned. And Karen acted fast. She knew it was going to be reverted. Ben pulled up the business registry. Guess who co-signed Gaskins' post-resignation employment paperwork at Calden Security? Let me guess. I muttered. Karen. Bingo. That same afternoon, Tom filed an emergency injunction in the state civil court. Unauthorized destruction of property, land fraud, and conspiracy to defraud a title holder. We requested immediate discovery rights and restraining orders against Karen Aldridge, 2 HOA board members, and Calden Security Services. And then came the media break we didn't expect. CNN picked up the story. I don't know how. Maybe a reporter with Mountain Property saw the Courier piece. Maybe a producer smelled ratings. But by Tuesday night, I was standing in front of a camera outside my flattened cabin site, talking to a guy named Liam from national TV. The land has been in my family for 15 years. My brother built that house by hand. They stole it. Then they billed me for the theft. That line went viral. Suddenly, we had momentum. HOA members were resigning. Calden was issuing statements. The city council launched an internal review committee, which is bureaucrat speak, for please don't ask how deep this rabbit hole goes. Then, late that night, Tom texted me one line. Sheriff's office just executed a search warrant on the HOA. Office, it was happening. The next morning, we met at the courthouse. Karen wasn't there, but her lawyer was. Smug, clean-shaven, and holding a folder thick enough to break a window. He tried to argue for dismissal. Claimed procedural confusion, unclear ownership, standard maintenance procedure for safety. Tom stood up with the photos, the maps, the whistleblower messages, the demolition invoice, the footage of Karen giving orders, and, finally, the reclamation list. The judge didn't say a word for a full minute. Then he granted the motion to proceed with full discovery, denied their request to dismiss, and scheduled a preliminary hearing. Karen's lawyer looked like he'd swallowed a screw. As we left the courtroom, I spotted someone leaning against the wall in a hoodie, head down. He looked up as I passed. Hey, he muttered. Check your back gate. I blinked. What? Trail cam by the old fence. You might want to look at the footage from 3 weeks before the demolition. That's when they scoped you out. Karen came in person. I blinked again. Who the hell are you? Used to be on the board, he said. Not anymore. Then he was gone. I texted Ben. He drove up that evening and we went to the cabin site together. The trail cam, one I'd mounted on an old cedar stump to watch for black bears, was still there, covered in grime, battery barely clinging to life. We popped the SD card, and there she was, Karen, in daylight, climbing the slope with 3 men in khaki, pointing at the house. Laughing, Ben handed me a flask. We just got your closing argument. By the time the court hearings began in earnest, the case had outgrown our little Georgia mountain town. Now it had its own subreddit, 3 viral TikToks, a local protest outside Whispering Pines gates, and a nickname in the press, the Cabin Caper. I hated that name, but I loved the momentum. Tom, Ben, and I had worked nonstop for 2 weeks. We built a timeline so detailed it looked like we were prepping for a federal racketeering trial. Karen's legal team kept stalling with procedural objections, but the judge wasn't buying it anymore. Every time they tried to minimize the situation, we dropped another bombshell. First, we subpoenaed the demolition crew that flattened my house. The foreman testified under oath that the job had seemed a little weird to him. The parcel had a private gate and 2 no trespassing signs, both of which they cut down on Karen's orders. The foreman said he was told the structure was abandoned by the HOA president directly and that no permits or court orders were presented. That was all we needed, an admission that they never confirmed ownership. Next came the security company. We hit them with documents showing that the request to disable my alarm system came from a phone number registered to the teenage daughter of one of the HOA board members. Worse, the timestamp of the call coincided with a board meeting listed in their own records. Karen was present. Surveillance footage from the called-in lobby confirmed it. She walked in at noon, left at 12:17 p.m. My system was disabled at 12:11 p.m. Tom practically growled as he presented that in court. Then came the whistleblower emails. One former HOA member had kept meticulous notes on Karen's little beautification initiative, where she targeted abandoned-looking properties on the HOA border for review and action. My house was circled in red on her hand-drawn map. 5 others had already been taken down using similar maneuvers. Only one previous owner had fought back and settled quietly out of court. But now, we weren't settling. The real grenade, though, was the Gaskins connection. A new witness emerged, an administrative assistant from the county zoning office. Nervous and pale, she testified that Gaskins had been pressured by an outside consultant to approve the redrawing of several parcels. She said it was made clear that if he wanted a future in local government contracting, he'd play ball. She named the consultant. It was Karen's cousin, listed on LinkedIn as a private land use strategist. Tom turned toward Karen's legal table and smiled like a wolf. The judge granted a full-scale fraud investigation and referred the matter to the district attorney's office. Karen was now facing not just civil liability, but criminal charges for conspiracy, document tampering, property destruction, and fraud. The next day, Karen tried to hold a press conference in front of the Whispering Pines clubhouse. It did not go well. Residents, many of whom had supported her blindly, were now waving signs with phrases like, "Not in our name," and "I want my HOA fees back." Someone had even made t-shirts with my cabin's silhouette and the phrase, "Rebuild Stroud Strong." As she approached the podium, someone asked, "Why were you on his property 3 weeks before the demo?" Karen's face locked. "Next question," she said. But there weren't any. 2 days later, law enforcement raided her home. They found printed property maps, meeting transcripts, copies of HOA violation notices with blank addresses, and a ledger tracking projected reimbursements from various demo jobs. Then they found the kicker, a draft contract for a private development firm, offering her a consulting position in exchange for helping acquire unmanaged parcels adjacent to HOA land. It was over. Tom called me at 2 a.m. DA's office filed the charges, 7 counts. They're indicting Karen and 3 other HOA board members, the security company CEO, Gaskins, and the attorney who notarized the fake deed. I didn't say anything at first. Then I exhaled. It wasn't joy. It was relief laced with a quiet, burning rage. They bulldozed a man's legacy, I said. Let's return the favor with paperwork. The courtroom was packed. The county courthouse hadn't seen this much attention in years. Reporters sat shoulder to shoulder on the benches, photographers jostled at the back, and a row of homeowners, some from Whispering Pines, some from other HOAs, lined the wall like quiet witnesses to a ritual cleansing. Karen Aldridge walked in wearing a gray suit and zero emotion. Her mouth was tight, her eyes twitching at the corners, but she moved like someone trying to summon dignity from the ashes. Behind her came 2 other HOA board members and the smirking lawyer who once told Tom our case was procedurally weak. Not anymore. The district attorney read the charges slowly. Conspiracy to commit fraud, destruction of private property, filing false instruments, tampering with cadastral records, bribery of a public official, wire fraud, and something I hadn't even expected, racketeering. I leaned over to Tom. "Rico." He nodded. She went wide. Multiple demolitions, forged documents, financial incentives, coordinated with a security firm and a zoning official. It's organized fraud. The DA wants to make an example. Karen pled not guilty, but that didn't mean much. Her empire was already disintegrating. The called-in security CEO took a plea deal in exchange for testimony. So did Gaskins. So did one of the HOA board members. And those deals all led in one direction, straight to Karen. A week later, she was back in court for the civil case, our lawsuit. This time, it was me taking the stand. I laid it out clearly. How my brother built the cabin over 10 years, how he died 3 years ago, how I inherited the land. I described the last time I'd been there, the alarm system I had installed, the coded gate, the signs. I showed the photos, before and after. The judge studied the after picture a long time. Nothing but bare soil and the outline of where my porch once sat. Then we presented the video. Trail cam footage. Karen, in khaki hiking pants, pointing at my house with a clipboard in hand, laughing with 2 men. They were carrying blueprints. Tom paused it right as she stepped onto my porch and smiled. "Is this the defendant, Your Honor?" The judge didn't even blink. "It is." The ruling came within days. Karen Aldridge was found personally liable for the unauthorized demolition of a private residence. So were the other defendants. The HOA was ordered to pay $820,000 in damages, including the full value of the destroyed home, costs for land restoration, emotional distress, and punitive damages. Whispering Pines HOA was dissolved by court order. The security company lost its license. Karen was remanded to federal custody while awaiting her criminal trial. But the best part came later. A month after the verdict, I received a letter, not from a court, but from a stranger. It was from the son of one of the other victims. His father's cabin had been bulldozed the same way mine had. He thanked me, said they never thought anyone would stand up to the HOA, that his dad cried when the news broke. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just about a cabin in the woods. It was about not letting people like Karen rewrite the rules of ownership. I rebuilt, not a replica, a resurrection, stone walls, steel beams, thick glass to reflect the morning sun off the ridgeline. I installed an upgraded alarm system, this time with off-grid solar backups, redundant cameras, and 2-way satellite comms. If anyone so much as sneezed near my fence, I'd get a real-time alert and GPS location. I named it Stroud House, after my brother, and next to the fireplace, I mounted the old trail cam that caught Karen in the act. As a reminder, I started a blog, Mountain Watch, where I document HOA abuses, property defense strategies, and interviews with lawyers, surveyors, and homeowners who've been pushed around too long. And it's grown. Now I get emails from all over the country. People send me their stories. I help them connect with attorneys, surveyors, journalists. The same way I was helped. A few months ago, a reporter called me a watchdog. I told him I wasn't a watchdog. I was a rescue helicopter pilot who got tired of pulling people out after the crash and decided to stop the damn sabotage in the first place. No more demolitions, not on my watch.